Good evening. And as I said, I'm Indra Adnan from the Alternative UK, and I'd like, first of all, to welcome our two speakers and perhaps invite them to introduce themselves. Laura, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Laura Roth. I live in the Basque Country. After living in Barcelona for many years, and I'm a researcher and an activist. I work mainly on issues connected to democracy, really strong democracy. And recently I've been focusing more on feminism and municipalism, because I think they are intimately connected to real democracy.
Thank you very much. And over to Hannah. Hannah, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Thanks, Indra. Hi, everybody. My name is Hannah Stevens, and I am I'm the director, apparently. I am the director of a tiny but mighty organisation called the Parliament Project, which is working to support women, whatever their political colours, to move forward on their journey in politics. I'm thrilled to be here, really looking forward to the conversation, learning and listening to all of you and sharing a little bit about what we do.
Thanks. Thank you very much. And so the shape of this evening's event will be, we're going to invite first Hannah to talk a bit more about the Parliament Project, and that will be followed by Laura, who will describe the work that she's been doing, very targeted on the feminisation of politics. And then we're going to have a little bit of a discussion between the three of us. At the Alternative UK, we've also been looking very carefully at the role of women in the new politics. And of course, I think it's significant myself that I'm a woman starting a new political platform. So we'll have a bit of a discussion between the three of us and then open to your questions, which I really encourage you to put questions as people are talking into the chat box, and then Roman will fish some of those out for us for a bit. And then we'll go into chat rooms for about 15 minutes, because I really want everybody to have a chance to explore what is a very complex and I feel radical idea, although at the same time one might say it's the most natural thing in the world, the feminization of politics. But I'd like to draw out its complexity, its tensions, but also the inevitable joy that I feel that it's bringing. So let's start, Hannah, over to you first, and talk, if you could introduce us to the Parliament Project. Thank you.
So yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be part of this conversation. I guess what I represent, or what I'm bringing to the table in this, is traditional politics, is the system that we have in place now. And I'm thrilled that networks like Flat Pack Democracy movements and like the Alternative exist to be trying to challenge that system, which is why I'm really excited about the partnerships that we're developing together. But nonetheless, the system as it is at the moment is local government, national government and devolved governments making decisions, and women are underrepresented. As we all know, we're stuck at 34%, almost in every sphere of government in this country. So what we're doing is we're working to encourage and support and nurture and motivate women to step forward into those traditional roles, those traditional political roles, and to create movement and change from within the current system. So currently, 34% of our MPs are female, and that is the highest it's ever been. That was an increase of 12 from the 2017 general election, and at that rate it will be 2057 before we reach gender parity in the House of Parliament. And I'm sure I'm not the only one here that believes that this past year in particular we've seen the results of having a largely male focused group of individuals making decisions that have impacts the lives of people across the country. So, and also in our councils, up and down councils across the country, we have 35% of our councillors are currently women, and only 6% of those identify as BAME, whereas about 14% of the population in England and Wales are BAME. So the racial representation isn't there as well. So And we only know that because organisations like Democracy Club and the Fawcett Society, after every local election, sit down and go through the internet and find the gender of people. There is nowhere in the system at the moment where councils or the democratic processes have to report the demographics of council candidates or even the elected politicians. So therefore, we don't have any of the data in place. When you have data in place, it's much easier to make shifts and recommendations. So there's also a lot of campaigning. We're not a campaign organisation, but we collaborate with campaigning organisations that are out there. Enact 106 is one of them, which is trying to push Section 106 of the Equality Act, which is forcing political parties to publish the demographic data of all of their candidates. So that's the situation. It's not good enough. Women make up 51% of the population in the UK, and yet, as we see, 34% of those with decision-making power. So what do? I mean, we're a tiny, tiny organisation, but we run workshops to demystify the process. These used to be in-person workshops, and we used to travel up and down the country having 2-hour conversations with groups of women, and really with the intention of lighting a fire under them. And I was one of those women. I had a very personal experience. I cared about my local community. I watched the news, I shouted at the telly, but it had never crossed my mind to get politically active. And I found myself at a festival going to a Parliament Project workshop, and was really, really, I had a real revelation that of course I had to do something. And so that's the conversation. And now, I don't know, 4 years later, I'm sat here talking to you and incredibly passionate about it. So things have shifted a lot for us in the past year. The world moving online has actually, for us, provided a lot of opportunities. And it's been a really, really exciting time. So our programme has shifted a lot. But at the core of it, we're trying to do the same thing, which is to demystify the process of how you stand. What are the roles that you can stand for, and how do you go about doing it? So we've been exploring over the past year with content, what information do women want to be having, and we're creating a community, bringing together women on Zoom in rooms like this, having the conversation, learning from each other, creating a safe space to ask what you think is the silly question, and really empowering women to take strides forward on their political journey. So we're looking at really, we think there's different stages that we all go through as we explore our role in politics. And we're the first moment, when you have that light bulb moment, when you realise that you want to get active, then you need to work out what that means for you. Are you going to stand as a parish councillor? Are you going to just go straight for it and become an MP? Then what does getting active actually mean? Like making a plan for yourself and then being open to that plan changing all the time. And then actually standing for selection and election. So we network with the parties, but we're also really keen to network and connect independent women across the country, and which is why it's so fantastic that Flatpack's doing this work. And we really want to collaborate, and we are collaborating to create a space where women involved in the Flatpack movement who are preparing to stand as councillors or who already are councillors can come together and have, again, it's about peer support. So we also have a peer support programme, which is a really exciting 7-week online conversation that we've been running for 4 years. We used to have a 1-hour induction to Zoom, which we no longer need. It's about 4 minutes now. And women come together and we put them in small groups of 5 or 6, and they meet every week, and they have homework, but we call it love work, each week to go and explore different things about themselves, about their story, how you feel about telling your story, how you feel about receiving feedback from others about who you are. That was last week. Next week is about building a team. We're looking at your online presence. So really having the conversations about a lot of the things that women are concerned about when they're considering stepping forward into politics. So again, it's about creating a sense of community where women are all lifting each other up. And we don't judge anyone about their political persuasions. You're not allowed to be a racist, you can't be a misogynist, you know, these sorts of things, but we're not talking about policy. So therefore this real cross-party, whether you're in a party or not, coming together and championing each other, and women who are further ahead in their journey, and to those who are at the very beginning getting started, really coming together and supporting each other. And it's really, really rich. So we're doing those we're creating those practical spaces, and it's not about shifting the bigger movement of how to shift our democracy, which is why I'm really excited to be here and to listen and to learn from Indra and Laura. And it's why I'm very excited and motivated by the Flat Pack Democracy movement. But we're creating those spaces for individual women to come together and work out what's next for them. So to give them the knowledge, the confidence and the skills that they need to step forward on their political journey. Oh, wow, that's exactly 7 minutes. I'll stop right there.
That's very well done there, Hannah.
Luke.
Just a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Sounds to me as if you are consciously changing the culture of politics and the way that you work together with the women. But is that part of your intention and part of your campaign, if you like, to introduce something specifically female? Or do you feel it's more to do with the numbers and an equality issue? Can you do those two things at the same time?
I absolutely think you can do the two things at the same time. And I met Peter and Flat Pack a year ago, and it's been a really wild year as we've lent into the democracy sector to understand what other organisations are doing to shift things, and it's had a massive impact, I think, on how we've shifted our programme in response to the world coming online. So I think our understanding of our role in changing the system, I think I was quite naive, and I think a year ago I would have been, oh no, we're just trying to give people a little shift on. But actually, like at the moment we've got 100 women on our peer support circles every Thursday evening, and I log in and I go, if this is the future of our politics, actually it is bigger than just a few workshops. I think I should give credit to what we're doing, and I guess I'm on the journey of learning how to do that and how to really appreciate that this is part of a much bigger movement. And we're tiny, right? But actually, 6,000 women have come through our workshops in the past 4 years, and those numbers increase dramatically once you go online. And we don't keep track of women. We don't claim women. You come to our workshop and then you get on with your lives, and you come to another one if you want to. You're very, very welcome. But actually, we invited an MP to one of our sessions to share her experience. And she mentioned that she'd been to one of our sessions 4 years ago when she was just starting to think about it. So actually, there are women that are in seats of power that have been through it. And the question you asked at the beginning, and seeing all of the comments that people put in the chat box about what the feminisation of politics is, all of that language is in our programme. It is about authenticity. It is bringing your whole self to the table. It is about generosity. It is about collaboration. And that is the language that we share with each other. So it's very interesting to me that that's everybody's response to that. So I think actually being a part of this conversation is helping me to understand that we are playing a role in this bigger shift in a way that maybe I hadn't, if I'm honest, hadn't totally given credit for.
No, that's great. It's a growing feeling and awareness, isn't it? I think I'll hand straight over to you, Laura, if you'd like to pick up the discussion and develop it with your work.
Thanks very much. I didn't know a lot about the Parliament project, and I'm super excited. I mean, it sounds amazing. I guess what I will share with you is directly connected to that, but it tries to go maybe a step further, not in the sense of improving something, but looking at another area of the problem. So the main question for us in recent years has been actually why some non-privileged people don't come into politics. Of course, women is a clear example, but also some other people. And in the case of women, why is it the case that only certain kinds of women are able to go in that journey? And even if they do, why do they have such a hard time there? And I guess we are looking at the problem from the other side, right? So we're looking at what is there in those political institutions that repels certain people, that makes them not want to be part of it. And then also the question is, what is politics in the first place, right? If you look at politics, if you think about politics from a feminist point of view, and here by feminism, I assume that everyone is understanding fighting against privilege and for equality, right? So what is politics in the first place here? It doesn't make any sense to separate party politics from the politics that we do every day in the places where we work, we do things together with other people. So politics is both what happens in the, let's say, public, in the public space, in the state, in public institutions, formal institutions, but also what happens outside. And why do I mention this? Because the way we organize is also based on patriarchal ways of doing politics, not simply party politics, national political parties and parliaments, councils, and so on. The way we organize in smaller places, in our social movements, in collectives, is also usually based on patriarchal ways of doing. So, and those ways of doing affect women, but they also affect other people as well. So the reason why we are looking at this in this way is that I'm part of, as I was mentioning before, I'm an activist in the Municipalist movement. I've been very active in Barcelona for several years. The way municipalism understands politics, at least new municipalism, the new versions of municipalism that are happening in the UK, but also in Spain, in many other places, are experiences of trying to engage both with formal, let's say, politics and what's outside in the community, the local social movements, local collectives, and doing politics in between, so we can change those institutions and make them more open to everyone. So if we see politics in this way, then feminizing politics can't simply mean having more women here or there, right? It has to mean doing politics in a different way that makes women, but also other non-privileged people, feel at home in politics. And it doesn't have to do with, at least in my view, with essentializing certain feminine roles. Empirical evidence, like brain studies and neuroscience, show that both men and women, depending on the case, have female and so feminine and masculine traits in different dimensions. So we are quite complex, but in practice, it is true that there are certain features that are more common in women and certain features that are more common in men, and certain practices that make us feel better when we are part of something. And so what is it in politics that makes us feel that we are not part of it? So that's the question that we are asking. And I'm part of this a network of municipalist organizations in different parts of Europe. We are working on this specifically on feminization of politics. And so that many of the things that I'm saying are not, so are things that come from a collective discussion. It's not a formal network, it's not a formal institution, you won't find it anywhere, but I just wanted to say that these are reflections that come from a collective work as well. So, so what does it mean to feminize politics? I will say a few practical things in a second. But first, I wanted to say like two small things about this. So as I was saying before, it cannot be simply about having more women in politics, right? And actually, once we touch those structures of the institutional arrangements that we work in, other people will be feeling more at home in politics as well. And it cannot be, so feminism in politics cannot require women to behave like men either. It cannot mean that we need to train women to behave like men. We need to train women to be smart and to be authentic, as Hannah was mentioning before. And it doesn't mean baking cakes and bringing them to meetings either, right? It's not about like, okay, being nicer and like I don't know, things that we usually associate with being feminine and things like that. But at the same time, there are certain things that we consider valuable, like cooperation, like using emotion, like non-confrontation, like sharing, taking care of each other, and things like that, that are usually because we live in a patriarchal society where the burden is distributed in an uneven way. These are things that women usually do, right? So if we bring women into politics, they will probably both bring those things, and if those practices are part of politics, they will be feeling happier when they do politics. So how do we do this? By changing practices, and this means informal practices but also formal practices within collectives, organizations, institutions, on different scales, different types of organizations, different types of institutions, and also by having more women in politics, right? And these two things, as I was saying before, they do reinforce each other, right? Or affect each other in a negative way. If we have more women, they will probably bring more of those characteristics. If we have those, if we implement those practices, probably women and also other people will be feeling more at home in those practices, and they will be they will want to participate more, and so on. So what practices? That's the interesting question, right? There can be hundreds of them, right, or thousands of them. It also depends on the organization, the kind of organization we are talking about. In this network, we've been mainly focusing on municipalist organizations that are running for elections, so citizen platforms that are connected to the local city council in that way, and in some cases they come into power and they govern those cities or towns. And we've gathered lots of tools, recommendations, reflections, and so on in a report that was published last year. It's called Feminized Politics Now. And I will mention just a few of the very big topics that we address there. I hope if you're interested, you can take a look. There's much more detail and also discussion there. So the first I mention is gender balance, of course, because it is part of feminizing politics, but this means not simply in positions of responsibility, but also gender balance in for how long people speak in a meeting, how many times people speak in meetings, I don't know, taking turns for different responsibilities and things like that. Many other examples that affect the way we see certain people within our organizations. Also, there's reflections about power, which is quite interesting for organizations going into formal political institutions, because political power is usually understood as something that I have when I take it from you, right? And I need to fight for that. So I will confront you, and we will see who wins, right? That's a patriarchal way of understanding power. But a feminist way of understanding power is based on building power by cooperating and sharing. And the more we share power, the more power we have, the more we are, and the more we can generate change. So it's also about that. Also, leadership is another dimension of this, closely related to power. How to generate types of leadership that are not based on who makes the decisions for the rest, but on who is able to mobilize people to first ask the right questions about what needs to be done, and then to find a solution together. Because most of the political problems that we address are really complex, and they don't have just one answer. So aiming at having an infallible leader doesn't make, it's not very useful. And then other elements are democracy, of course, participatory democracy, sharing decision making, sharing power, also care. And here, care doesn't simply mean care work and childcare. It means taking care of each other and the relationships in the organizations that we work with. Of course, taking care of dependent beings, and sharing the burden of taking care of dependent beings, not only because this should be a collective responsibility, but also so that people who don't have experience taking care of dependent beings develop that ability and have that experience. And also self-care, which is something that usually, I don't know about you, but normally it's really hard. And it's a really important part of any feminist way of being in the world, actually, not only in politics. Then also intersectionality. I've mentioned a few times that it's not simply about like black or white, women, men. It's experiences are very diverse in the two groups, and it's also really difficult to classify some people in one of those two groups. So we should always be alert and not mistakenly put people into boxes they don't want to be in. And then finally, nonviolence. And here, the point is, it's really important to implement practices that deal with different types of violence. I mean, not necessarily physical violence, but it can be even physical violence. Develop protocols and mediation mechanisms that can address situations of violence. It can be verbal violence, psychological violence, environmental violence. These are things that, unfortunately, also in really progressive collectives and groups is often present, and it's difficult to process that in a non-punitive way as well. So if we are talking about taking care of each other and doing things differently, also the reaction towards violence needs to be different, and not adding more violence. And then yeah, just to finalize, I think it's really easy to see the link between these kinds of practices and municipalism. And here, I forgot that I'm talking to people in the UK. I'm not talking about municipal socialism, right? I'm talking about municipalism in the sense that I was mentioning before, of articulating communities with local city councils in a more open and dialogical way. And to me, the connection between feminism and municipalism is very natural. It's easier to implement feminist practices in those contexts rather than, I don't know, national political parties. And at the same time, it's easier. It's easier. So municipalism is focused on changing the way politics is done, and not simply implementing other public policies and so on, like really opening politics and getting rid of privilege and professional politicians, right? And municipalism can, I think, feminism is a very strong ally here for municipalism. Although for some people it might be hard to talk about feminism. It depends on the context. If you want, you can use some other word. These are my children participating in the session as well. I hope you can hear them. And yeah, I don't know how long I've been speaking. I'm very sorry.
No, that's
and
great.
Looking forward to the questions.
Laura, thank you so much. And I think you did a great job there of suggesting that that the action of feminization is to really reclaim politics from the party political culture that we have now and bringing it back to the people. It seems to me like you're describing a people's politics that is simply open to people bringing what they have to offer and being open to each other without privilege and starting power from there. And I did read the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation paper that you described earlier on, and there was a phrase there. This one, feminization enables us to see politics as a realm that can serve to create communities, empowering people to take care of themselves, their peers, and others. And in that sense, it's got quite a lot to do, or it's got a lot in common with the friendly forms of anarchism, you know, where simply people are taking responsibility for themselves. And I would say that's also very much what is happening with flat pack democracy and the trust the people movements here. So you're very at home here, even if we may not be as active in our communities as we would like to be. But just one question before I go to the questions in the inbox. It seems to me that when you're talking about this kind of, you know, that it's a feminine logic, I think this is a word that you've used before, that we're bringing into the political sphere. And because women have a traditional role in the community, meaning they do so much unpaid work with the care work in communities, holding families together as well, they are traditionally associated with community work. Does that then mean, in your experience, that when you're doing this kind of work in municipalism, is it often the case that women have a stronger voice and that sometimes men stand back to allow the women to bring their wisdom or their experience into that space?
Meaning the organizations that I know?
Yeah, or your work at in the municipal level. It's not, I don't think we've got this exactly the same, well, maybe we don't have as much experience of it. Some people in this room might have, but it's not as common, the municipal work that you're describing. But is that what happens? Because, you know, often in the traditional politics, women fight for a voice, you know, but is it the other way around or not in the areas where you're working? Is the
No,
voice
it's
stronger?
not different. No, I mean, I don't have any experience in, I don't know, being part of a national political party or anything like that. So I'm sure it's much harder. But in my experience, I would say in any, not any, I mean, I need to be fair, but it's very common that in most environments, it is a bit harder for women to be heard. I mean, if it happens with our families and with our friends, that our male friends tend to speak more and repeat what we say after we just said it, you know, things like that. I mean, I think we are in a long process and a very happy process. I think we are reflecting on this, and that's great news. I wouldn't say this is something that is already happening in this or that place. I think we need to stay alert in that sense, and we need to reflect not only women on what our role is, but mainly, actually, I think mainly men reflect on the privilege they have and how they use it, and if they use it for for to improve the situation of those who are working with them, not simply those who are that. So it's really easy to say that, okay, so our organizations is doing things for for group X or Y, you know, but within our group, how is power shared? Who is making decisions? Who is visible? Who is I don't know, learning? Who is not? And things like that. I have company. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard to say that that it is already happening. Although yeah, as I was saying, I'm sure it's much more difficult in other kinds of organizations. So I can't imagine being a member of parliament or anything like that. I mean, it must be hell. I mean, having to wear a tie or things like that. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not insane. It has been happening. So,
thank you. Roman, do you want to fish some questions out from the chat box?
Yeah, we've got a few more coming in now, but I wonder if maybe Deborah in Oxford just wanted to ask, she asked a couple of thought-provoking questions at the beginning. Don't know if she'd like to ask those again.
Deborah?
Oh, I was busy trying to write a different question. I mean, it was something about, I mean, I think it was something about the language, that I struggled with the word feminization, and I slightly worry that using the term and talking about these things creates yet another them and us kind of environment that can also be alienating. But the question that I really want to ask, if I can jump on the bandwagon and come first, is, I mean, I've been involved in local politics for 15 years. I then stopped that, and now I'm a community activist, which I find much more empowering. I think this is what women do, which is just get on with things behind the scenes and get things done in many ways, and don't feel that they need that public platform in quite the same way. But I'm a political person, I really am, and I'm torn. I can't bear the thought of engaging in the system as it stands now, because it's so divisive. I find it so alienating. But there's a degree of community activism that will take you so far and no further. And I don't know if this is the room in which to say all this, but there's a bit of me that feels like saying I'd be lying to try and encourage female friends to stand with me as independents. You know, I'd have to mean it, and I kind of do, but not in the present system. It's a real issue, and I don't know if I've got the energy to change the system. I kind of like being, as I said in my chat, on the outside pissing in. But as I say, it takes you so far and no further. So that's not really addressing the issues, but that's what I'm grappling with.
That's great. Thank you, Deborah. And perhaps we'll just take one more question, comment.
Can I chime in there?
Well, I was just going to click a couple, Hannah, and then if you could both respond.
Fine.
Then before we go into breakout rooms. Yes, one more, Roman?
Yes, sort of along those lines from Ing Daniels. Did you want to ask a question there?
Hi there, thank you. That was very interesting. My question is more general. I agree very much with that we don't want to create a new dichotomy between men and women. I think that's very important. But also, I work myself in the university sector, and I cannot tell you, I think, as I said in my question, it's more about changing our values more generally, which then, as you said, Laura, very clearly, it's not only women, there's so many underprivileged people that just their values don't fit in this kind of, I think it's linked with capitalism. It's very structural. It's a much bigger issue than just politics and whether you have men or women. And I think that came out of this talk very clear. But I personally think education at a very young age, our young people are not taught any of this. So how can you change politics if the next generation even is not being taught, it's not being considered as important? I mean, I'm generalizing. I'm sure in some places this is done quite well, but I just wonder what you think about how education in many ways, particularly look to the next generation, can improve these ways of thinking.
Thanks very much, Inga. And Hannah, would you like to have a go at this question?
Sure, I love this. Okay, but rein me in if I go on for too long. So just to respond to you, Inga, I think you're absolutely right that the lack of civic education and political literacy for young people is absolutely appalling, and it always has been. And it's interesting, again, since I met Peter in the Flat Pack movement, having met other organisations working in the wider democracy space, how many organisations there are really trying to create the resources to support teachers in their teaching. And actually, last week was the first APPG, the all-party parliamentary group, gathering on political literacy. And so it's the first time there's been a conversation amongst Westminster parliamentarians about this. And everyone was very on the same page about the need to just simply extend it, not introduce new literacy, but what's already in place, but to ensure that it's built in from the curriculum from an earlier stage. And I think that's such a fundamental part of this. And with the world that younger people are in, you know, people in their teens, their 20s are activists. Like, they are so active and they care so much, but the connection between the campaigns that they're running and the conversations they're having online, between even considering that where you can make that change is stepping into politics, is so far apart. I'm kind of interested in how we unite that conversation. And really, I think we just need an absolutely enormous comms campaign to help people connect the dots between the petitions they're signing and the memes that they're sharing. Actually get active. But in response to your point, Deborah, I really get it. I totally get it. And I would encourage you actually to join one of our peer support circles, because we're kind of creating the space to have conversations like this. And the culture, I'd written down, I think political parties are now off-putting for people, which is why I'm so interested in the independence movement that you're creating here. I think it's an idea of not having to get sucked into often the patriarchal systems that are in place. But I have refined that, because it is the system that's off-putting. But you know, to women like you, Deborah, if you're already active in your community, you can make the change, and you can't make the change to the system until you get into it. And so that's where we, you know, what we're trying to do as an organisation is create the space for women like you to come and have those conversations, hear from other women, and try to work out what you are going to do. And fine, of course, not everybody's going to make the decision to step forward into politics, but there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women up and down the country, and there's probably more, I've just only spoken to a few hundred of them, that think the same. And if all of us that felt like you did, if all of us step forward, you know, that is the beginning of this kind of cultural shift that we want to see. And response to your points about the language of the feminization, I really understand that. You know, we don't want this to be our work is about getting more women in, right? It's that simple, but it is part of this bigger piece, which is a culture shift. It's not that we just want more women, and it's not that we want politics to become more feminine. We want a general culture shift, and actually the language around feminization, all those beautiful words that you shared at the beginning, authenticity, collaboration, strength, that's what we want. And in some sense, that's gender irrelevant. It's about a culture shift, and the way things have been so steeped in misogyny that those values that are traditionally female, so that's why this kind of gender thing comes into it, is that men and the way that the patriarchy has created our political systems, as somebody said, Victorian it was set up so many hundreds of years ago, it just doesn't work for us. But until there's more people with that attitude, so actually, I'm going off topic and off brand, I don't think we need more women in politics. I think we need more feminists in politics.
Laura, before we go into the break, thank you very much, Hannah. It's great responses. And Laura, before we go into breakout rooms, do you feel there's more that you can say on this?
Yeah, two really small things. I agree with everything that Hannah was saying. I would just add, in education, I think one of the key elements, so I agree, it's really important. I would add, one of the key elements is helping children reflect on models of masculinity, because it's one of the conversations that it's not the most common one, but there are other ways of being a man that doesn't require being an asshole, basically, you know. There are other ways of understanding your relationship with other people that are not based on confrontation and things like that. So and also for adults, I mean, not only for children, but also for adults. I think that reflections around masculinity are really, really important. And then about elections, yeah, also, of course, it makes sense. It's a rational reaction, right? Not going into politics, into party politics, or into formal institutions. But I would say in addition to the, I mean, things like the great work that Hannah and her colleagues are doing, I would say also an interesting strategy that many people are discussing in the organizations that I know and implementing it is that so you can commit to take a step forward, but never do it alone. And I don't mean simply like running for office. Also raising an issue within your organization that is conflictive, that is a problem. Like, don't go into the fight alone. It doesn't mean you can't go into a hard conversation or make a hard decision, but don't do it alone. So you don't receive all the anger from the other side, right? So find support, find your group, your people, feel safe, and then do whatever you want to do. So that would be my only suggestion.
Thanks very much. And I think it's time we went into the breakout rooms now. There's quite a lot of questions coming in, and I feel it's very important that everyone has a chance to really consider what feminization of politics could mean to them. And one of the questions I want perhaps you could consider is whether or not it's true that we can only change politics from within politics, or whether or not it's also possible to change the political system from outside of political party politics. So the work that Community Transformers is doing, or the work that maybe Flatpack has been doing, is it a different kind of politics maybe? Or is there room for a different idea of politics altogether coming through people power? In other words, you know, are there alternatives to our current system that feminization would be more friendly to and more powerful in? So lots of things that have been brought up in the last hour or so. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to have a conversation. Please introduce yourselves. Only 3 people per room, so that you have a chance to chat, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone.
Hello.
Nice to see you again. Hope you had good conversations. I'm going to encourage everyone to go into gallery view now and to be able to see each other. And what I'd like to do before we go into any kind of summing up, we've got less than 10 minutes. I'd just like to invite people to raise their hands if they felt that they heard something or found themselves saying something in their breakout room that really changed their view of what's possible through the feminization of politics. So if anybody would like to raise their hands, and I'd also like to encourage men to speak, because there might be some sense then that this is for women, but it's for everyone to speak. So if anybody would like to raise their hand. Roman, I can't see everyone. If you can see someone that I can't, please say.
Can't see him yet. Yeah, Jim.
Councillor Jim.
I'll just raise my hand and then everyone else can talk. I think one of the things we talked about in our room was Zoom and the ability, if it endures, that there are people who can get involved, people who with childcare or care of elderly parents or whatever should be able to get elected, shouldn't have to go to a town hall every month or whatever into a fusty meeting. And that is some way towards enabling a wider diversity of people, of whatever diversity to come. So Zoom changed my mind, and that concept, rather than just having the time and availability, might be good to get a few people who've got the intelligence.
Thank you, Jim. Carolyn. Carolyn, would you like to unmute yourself? I think you put your hand up.
Oh, sorry. No, I just put my hand up for the hand up things. I didn't take it down fast enough.
Okay. Peter and Sheila and Peter, please do.
Hello, everyone. Very briefly, we heard a horrible story of bullying of someone who gets into a majority conservative controlled political situation, and really evil bullying. And living as we do here in the Square Mile, we have a toxic culture, 40% Freemasons and so on and so on. And independent women councillors have had the most extreme bullying here. So it's to raise that issue of the hatred that can rain down on you as soon as you start to suggest a different culture, including a feminized culture, which has devastating impacts.
Yeah. So it's actually quite surprising and shocking, isn't it, when you think about the changes that might be being made, or in a way listening to both Hannah and Laura about the new ideals that are coming to the fore, to think about how much still is almost in the dark ages in this country, in our own environment. Thank you, Peter. And anybody else would like to contribute something? Sandra.
Hello. Yeah, in our discussion, we talked about why now, and it basically came down to COVID and how awful that whole situation's been, and that people have come forward on Zoom, and community groups have got active, and we've done things that we hadn't done before. So it's like, we can't allow ourselves to be put back into the box, that now is the moment. Why now? It's now because, we've got an opportunity. Things have been done, in the economy and everything that haven't been thought possible before. So there's that opportunity, and I think it's only a window. So if people are thinking about stepping forward, don't put it off, because this is a really important moment in time. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank
you very much for that. Thank you, Sandra. Sorry.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Just a little plug that actually on the 24th of Feb, we have an online workshop for women, which is about becoming a town or parish councillor. So if that is something that you're considering or thinking about, then that would be a lovely space for you to come and kind of continue this conversation. I really intended to have the registration open so I could just give it to you, but I haven't. So I might ask Roman, I assume everyone's emails are through Eventbrite, to just send you a follow-up, and I'll get on that early next week, because we'd love to welcome you there if you're thinking about it, because you're right, sooner rather than later, and there's some opportunities for May if, fingers crossed, those elections still happen. That's all.
Thank you. And I'm going to do something maybe unforgivable. I'm going to call upon Annabelle McFadgen. I'm sorry about that, Annabelle. But I also sort of want to emphasize that coming forward in community work or community activism of all kinds is also the feminization of politics. And I wonder, Annabelle, if you could say anything about the kind of work that you're doing that people might also want to step up for.
Yeah, I was actually going to write something in the chat in response to Sandra, because I also think that this is a moment for community organising, because there is a feeling out there of people power, agency, and we in Frome have set up something called the Neighbourhood Network, Frome Neighbourhood Network, and it's a way of us sharing and networking and learning from each other about how what we can do for each other in our communities, on the ground, on our streets, and the way that could grow could be also groups of people coming together to make decisions. I mean, it can also be a kind of rebirth of local democracy from the absolute grassroots up. That could be the vision, and I have hopes in that. Of course, both are important, but that's where I'm putting my energies at the moment, and I think others are as well, through Trust the People and those kind of projects. Yeah, that's
lovely. Thanks, and sorry again for putting you on the spot. So we have to close the meeting now, I'm afraid. But my sense is it's really just, you know, an opening conversation, and one that can really be expanded and developed, and I hope we'll have a chance to do that again. For more on this, go to the Trust the People site, the Flat Pack Democracy site, but also the Alternative UK, where in each of these places it's being hotly pursued. Hannah and Laura, if you'd like to have a final word. Hannah, I think, anything more than the opportunity you just put for us?
So on the 10th of February, we're going to release our whole programme of work. So every single workshop that any woman can sign up to over the next 6 months, it's all free. And there's a whole heap of really interesting conversations that we're running. So if you're interested in continuing to explore your own political journey, then I'd absolutely love to have you there. And the amazing Pam Barrett from Flatpack will be our guest speaker at the first event, which I mentioned, which was on February 24th. So I'll get some information around to you through Roman. But thanks. I really, really hope to meet some of you lovely women in another workshop soon.
Thank you. And Laura, any final words?
No, not really. Thanks very much. And no, stay with the previous message. That's really important.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm sorry to close the conversation. Happy to see you all. Thank you very much for coming, and look forward to seeing you next time.